Evan Reyes woke up with the worst hangover of his life and absolutely no idea where he was. His head felt like someone was using it as percussion practice. His mouth tasted like something had died in it, and the light filtering through the room's windows was aggressively offensive to his current state of existence. He groaned and tried to piece together the previous night. There had been celebrating. He remembered that much. His cargo crew had just completed a particularly lucrative shipping contract, 6 months of work culminating in a massive payout, and they'd gone to one of Veritak's crossings, high-end entertainment districts to blow off steam. He remembered drinks, a lot of drinks, some kind of elaborate cocktail the bartender had promised was species-compatible. He remembered dancing, laughing with his crew, meeting someone, more drinks, and then nothing. Complete blackout. But this definitely wasn't his quarters. His apartment on the station was modest, functional, designed for someone who spent most of his time on cargo ships. This room was enormous, decorated with materials that screamed wealth and taste, with furniture that probably cost more than Evan made in a year. He was wearing clothes he didn't recognize, soft and expensive, nothing like his usual practical work gear. Before he could fully process his confusion, the door opened. Not carefully, not tentatively, but with the confidence of people who had every right to enter. 2 individuals in elaborate armor stepped inside, their uniforms marking them as private security, not station personnel. High-end private security, the kind that protected people with serious money and power. "Mr. Reyes," one of them said with professional courtesy, "Her Majesty Queen Sarath requests your immediate presence. Please come with us." Evan blinked at them, trying to parse that sentence through his hangover. "Queen, Majesty, there had to be some mistake. I think you've got the wrong person," he managed, his voice rough. "I'm just a cargo specialist. I don't know any queens." "There is no mistake," the guard said firmly but not unkindly. "You are Evan Reyes, human, cargo specialist for the merchant vessel Helios Dawn. Her Majesty is quite clear about who she wishes to see. Please, sir, it would be better if you came voluntarily." The implied threat of involuntary was clear enough. Evan, still piecing together consciousness, decided cooperation was his best option. He let the guards escort him through corridors that became increasingly opulent, past security checkpoints that required biometric verification, into sections of the station he'd only seen in promotional materials. This was the diplomatic quarter, where visiting dignitaries and trade representatives maintained residences. The kind of place a cargo worker like Evan had no business being. They reached a set of massive doors that opened onto a room that could only be described as a throne room. It was smaller than Evan would have imagined a throne room being, but there was no mistaking the purpose. And sitting on an elevated seat that was definitely a throne was a woman who made Evan's breath catch despite his hangover. She was Voltorian. He recognized the species from news reports and trade briefings. Tall, easily 6 feet, with skin that had a faint iridescent quality in the light. Her ears were long and elegantly pointed, a distinctive feature of her people, and her eyes were dark and intense as they fixed on him. She wore formal attire that was both regal and somehow looked like it could convert to armor at a moment's notice. And she was furious. Evan could see it in every line of her posture, in the way her hands gripped the arms of her throne, in the barely controlled emotion in her expression. This was someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will while wanting to explode. "Leave us," she commanded, her voice tight. The guards bowed and retreated, closing the doors behind them. Evan found himself alone with a very angry alien queen, and he had no idea why. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she demanded without preamble. Evan's hangover brain struggled to form a response. "Your Majesty, I honestly have no idea what's happening right now. I woke up about 10 minutes ago in a room I don't recognize, and I was told you wanted to see me, but I don't know why. If I've done something wrong, it wasn't intentional." Queen Sarath's expression flickered through several emotions, rage, disbelief, something that might have been panic, before settling back into tightly controlled fury. Last night, the treaty celebration for the Veritax commercial agreements. You were there. Fragments of memory surfaced. Yes, he'd been there. The celebration had been open to all station residents, a massive party celebrating new trade agreements. His crew had gone because there was free food and drink, and cargo specialists never passed up free anything. I was there, Evan admitted, but I don't remember much. Someone definitely spiked the drinks, or I'm not as species compatible with Voltorian alcohol as the bartender claimed, because I blacked out pretty early in the evening. Someone did spike the drinks, Sareth confirmed, her voice still tight. My intelligence services have confirmed it. Political sabotage, meant to embarrass me in front of other dignitaries. I also don't remember most of the evening, which is completely unprecedented in my life and deeply concerning. She stood from the throne and moved closer, and Evan saw that beneath the fury, she was afraid. But I remember enough to know that you and I, during that celebration, She stopped, visibly gathering herself. There was an encounter, an intimate encounter. And this morning, when I underwent my regular health screening, the physicians discovered I'm pregnant. With your child, a human child, which should be biologically impossible, but apparently Voltorian and human genetics are more compatible than anyone realized. The room seemed to tilt. Evan's hangover suddenly felt very far away compared to the enormity of what she just said. I'm sorry, what? I am pregnant with your child, Mr. Reyes. Confirmed by every test my physicians could run. Approximately 2 weeks along by Voltorian development standards, which means it happened last night. You are the father of the future heir to the Voltorian commercial empire. Sareth's composure cracked slightly. And by Voltorian law and custom, that means you cannot leave. You are now bound to remain within my household until the child is born, possibly longer. You cannot return to your ship. You cannot leave this station, and you absolutely cannot discuss this situation with anyone outside this room without my explicit permission. Evan tried to find words. His mouth opened and closed several times. Finally, all he could manage was, I don't remember any of it. I don't remember being with you. I don't remember choosing this. Neither do I, Sareth said, and there was genuine anguish in her voice now. Someone tampered with our drinks, Mr. Reyes. We were both incapacitated, both unable to make informed decisions. But the outcome is the same regardless of how it happened. I'm carrying a child, you're the father, and Voltorian law means we're both bound by this whether we chose it or not. She returned to her throne and sat heavily, looking exhausted. I've been queen for 3 years. 3 years of fighting for every scrap of authority against court factions, who think I'm too young or too female or too progressive to rule effectively. This pregnancy, right now, in these circumstances, could be used to force my abdication. My enemies will claim I'm irresponsible, lacking judgment, unfit to rule. Having the father bound by law to remain is the only thing that gives this situation any legitimacy. She looked at him directly. So yes, Mr. Reyes, you are my prisoner. Not in chains, you'll have comfortable quarters and be treated with respect, but you cannot leave. Because the alternative is political chaos that could tear my empire apart. Evan stood in the throne room, his life completely upended by circumstances he couldn't remember and didn't choose, and had absolutely no idea what to say or do about any of it. The chapter ended with him trying to process that he was apparently going to be a father and a prisoner, both at once, and he had no memory of the choice that led to either. The quarters they gave Evan were absurdly luxurious and felt exactly like a prison. He had a suite larger than the entire apartment he'd maintained on the station, with furniture that was worth more than his annual salary and technology he didn't fully understand. There was a sitting room, a bedroom with a bed designed to accommodate his human physiology, a private bathroom that could apparently adjust water temperature and pressure to hundreds of different species preferences, and even a small office space. It was beautiful and comfortable, and he couldn't leave. Guards were stationed outside his door, polite but immovable. They informed him he could move freely within the royal district but could not leave it without escort. He could not communicate with his ship or crew without supervision. He could access station networks, but his messages would be monitored. He was not technically a prisoner, they assured him, but the restrictions made that claim feel hollow. For the first week, Evan barely saw Queen Sarath. She communicated through advisors, sending instructions about his medical examinations and schedule but never appearing herself. The few times he caught glimpses of her in the royal wing, she looked exhausted and stressed, moving between meetings with the kind of forced composure that suggested someone barely holding themselves together. The medical examinations were thorough and uncomfortable. Dr. Kelris, Sarath's personal physician, was professional and kind, but the tests were invasive in ways that made Evan deeply uncomfortable. They confirmed what Sarath had said. Somehow, impossibly, human and Volturian genetics were compatible enough for reproduction. The pregnancy was real, developing normally, and would last approximately 8 months by Volturian standards. Dr. Kelris also explained the legal and cultural situation Evan found himself in. Volturian society placed immense importance on parentage and lineage. Both parents of a royal child were bound by law and tradition to remain present and committed to raising the heir. Abandonment was one of the gravest crimes in Volturian culture, punishable by exile or worse. The father of a royal child had certain rights, Kelris explained, but also inescapable obligations. Evan, who had built a career and life specifically around maintaining freedom and avoiding permanent attachments, was now legally bound to stay in one place indefinitely with a woman he didn't know. For a child, he didn't remember choosing to conceive. He was angry about it, frustrated by the complete lack of agency, overwhelmed by the implications. But he was also, despite everything, concerned about Sarath. The glimpses he caught of her showed someone under immense pressure, and while he was angry at being trapped, he understood she hadn't chosen this situation any more than he had. 2 weeks into his captivity, Evan demanded an actual conversation with Sarath. He made the request through the guards, through advisors, through anyone who would listen, with increasing insistence. To his surprise, Sarath agreed. They met in a private garden within the royal quarters, a space of careful beauty that felt like an attempt to bring nature into the sterile perfection of the station. Sarath was there when Evan arrived, standing by a fountain, still looking exhausted but making an obvious effort at composure. "Mr. Reyes," she greeted him formally, "you wanted to speak with me. I want to understand what's actually happening," Evan said directly. "Not the legal situation, I've had that explained. I want to understand you. Why you're keeping me here, what you're actually afraid of, what this situation means to you personally rather than politically." Sarath studied him for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. She gestured to a bench and sat, and Evan joined her. "My father died 3 years ago," she began without preamble. "Heart failure, completely unexpected. I was young to take the throne, barely trained for the role. Since then, I've been fighting constantly to maintain authority against court factions who believe I'm unqualified. Some think I'm too progressive, willing to change traditions they hold sacred. Others simply believe women shouldn't rule. I've had to prove myself with every decision, every policy, every interaction." She looked at the fountain, not meeting his eyes. "A pregnancy right now, especially one resulting from what appears to be a drunken encounter at a public event, gives my enemies exactly the ammunition they need. They'll claim I lack judgment, that I'm ruled by emotion rather than reason, that I've dishonored the throne and the empire. They'll push for my abdication or the appointment of a regent to guide me, which means control me and reverse everything I've worked to achieve. So I'm here because letting me leave would make you look worse," Evan said, trying not to sound as bitter as he felt. "Yes," Sarath admitted bluntly, "but also because Volturian law genuinely requires it. The father of a royal child cannot simply abandon their responsibility. If you left, if you rejected the child, it would be seen as my failure to properly secure the bond. It would be evidence that I'm unfit to rule, that I can't even maintain the basic family structures our society depends on. She finally looked at him. I didn't want this, Mr. Reyes. I don't remember choosing this. My physicians have confirmed that both our drinks were tampered with, some kind of targeted chemical meant to lower inhibitions and impair judgment. Someone wanted me compromised, probably to create exactly this kind of political crisis. But Voltorian biology means I have no choice but to proceed with the pregnancy. Termination isn't possible after the first few days, and we're well past that point. So I'm carrying a child I didn't plan for with a man I don't know, and I have to make it work or lose everything. Evan absorbed this, his anger still present but tempered by understanding. I get that you're trapped, but so am I. I didn't choose this either, and now my whole life has been upended. I can't go back to my ship, can't work, can't talk to my crew. I'm just stuck here, waiting for a child to be born that I have no memory of choosing to create. I know, Sarah said quietly, and I'm sorry, truly. If there were any other way, I would take it. But there isn't. Voltorian law is absolute on this point, and I can't change it even if I wanted to without the court's approval, which they would never give. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Evan asked, "What if we tried to work together instead of me just being your prisoner? We're both stuck in this situation. Maybe we could try to make it less miserable by actually communicating instead of avoiding each other." Sareth looked surprised. "You're not demanding I release you, not threatening legal action through human authorities. Most people in your position would be furious." "I am furious," Evan said. "But being furious doesn't change the situation, and I'm practical enough to recognize that fighting you on this probably makes everything worse for both of us. If we're going to be stuck together for 8 months minimum, maybe we should try to not hate each other." For the first time, something like hope crossed Sareth's face. "I would appreciate that, more than you probably realize. I've been dreading every interaction with you, expecting justified anger and resentment. If we could actually talk, actually try to navigate this together, it would make everything easier." "Then let's start with honesty," Evan proposed. "No political facades, no formal protocol, just two people trying to deal with an impossible situation. You tell me what you actually need. I'll tell you what I actually need, and we'll see if we can find some kind of compromise." "That sounds reasonable," Sareth agreed. "Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at not being formal. It's been trained into me since childhood. Dropping the Queen Act is harder than you might think. And I'm terrible at protocol," Evan admitted. "So we'll probably annoy each other regularly, but at least it'll be honest annoyance." Sareth's smile was slight but genuine. "I think I can work with that." Over the following weeks, Evan and Sareth developed an unexpected rhythm. They met daily, initially in the garden but gradually in less formal spaces, just talking. They established ground rules: honesty over politeness, direct communication over diplomatic doublespeak, and a mutual agreement to not blame each other for a situation neither had chosen. Evan learned about Voltorian culture through these conversations. The complex social hierarchies, the emphasis on duty and tradition, the weight of expectations placed on anyone born to power. Sareth had been trained from childhood to be queen, educated in politics and strategy and proper conduct, but never really given the chance to be just herself. The throne had consumed her entire identity. Sareth learned about Evan's life in turn. He'd grown up on a colony world, lost his parents to an industrial accident when he was 19, and had spent the last 8 years deliberately building a life without permanent attachments. Cargo work was perfect for that, moving from station to station, forming friendships that were real but temporary, never staying long enough to build the kind of connections that could hurt if they broke. "So you chose isolation," Sareth observed during one conversation. deliberately constructed a life where you couldn't be hurt by loss. And you were forced into it, Evan replied. Surrounded by people but fundamentally alone because everyone sees the crown instead of you. We're isolated in opposite ways but with the same result. They discovered unexpected compatibility. Both were pragmatic, preferring practical solutions over ideological purity. Both had sharp senses of humor that emerged when they relaxed enough to drop their respective masks. Both were dealing with the fundamental unfairness of having their lives altered by circumstances beyond their control. The pregnancy progressed. Evan started attending Sarath's medical appointments, initially because protocol required his presence, but gradually because he was genuinely curious and concerned. Seeing the ultrasound images of the developing child made the situation real in ways it hadn't been before. This wasn't just an abstract problem. This was an actual person who would exist and depend on them. "Are you okay?" Sarath asked quietly after one appointment where they'd seen particularly clear images. "With all of this, I know you didn't choose it." Evan considered his answer carefully. "I'm not okay with how it happened. I'm still angry about not having a choice, about being trapped here. But the kid, that's different. None of this is the baby's fault. They didn't ask to be conceived in whatever mess that night was. So yeah, I'm starting to accept that this is happening, and if it's happening, I'd rather be involved than resentful. That's better for everyone, especially the child." Something in Sarath's expression softened. "You're already thinking about them as a person. Not just the situation but the actual child. That's more than I expected and more than some people in your position would manage." "They're going to exist," Evan said simply. "Seems important to think about who they'll be, not just what they represent politically." The political situation grew more complicated as the pregnancy became impossible to hide. Sarath's enemies in the court began circulating rumors about the human father, questioning the legitimacy of the heir, suggesting Sarath should abdicate for the good of the empire. Sarath handled it with perfect public composure, but Evan saw the toll it took. One evening, he found her in the garden after a particularly brutal session with her counsel. She was sitting alone, her perfect posture finally collapsed, and she was shaking. Evan sat beside her without saying anything, just present. Eventually, Sarath spoke. "They want me to denounce you. To claim you took advantage of me when I was incapacitated, that I was unable to consent. It would give me political cover, make me the victim rather than someone who made a poor choice. It would protect my authority." She looked at him, her eyes red. "But it would destroy you. You'd be arrested, probably executed under Voltorian law for violating the Queen. And we both know that's not what happened. Neither of us remembers consenting. We were both incapacitated." Evan felt cold settle in his stomach. "What did you tell them?" "I told them no, that I would not sacrifice an innocent person to preserve my political position. That if I can't maintain my authority while telling the truth, then I don't deserve to rule." She laughed bitterly. "They think I'm letting sentiment override practicality, that I'm proving I'm unfit by protecting you." "Thank you," Evan said quietly, "for not throwing me under to save yourself. That took courage." "You're the father of my child," Sarath said simply. "Whatever else is true, whatever political calculations exist, that matters. You matter." It was the first time either had explicitly acknowledged that their relationship had become something beyond just shared circumstances. They were becoming people who cared about each other, and that changed everything. As the pregnancy progressed into its 6th month, they developed genuine friendship. They spent evenings together, talking about everything from politics to trivial station gossip. Evan learned to navigate Voltorian court etiquette well enough to attend some of Sarath's official functions, standing beside her as the acknowledged father of her child. Sarath learned to relax around Evan, dropping the formal queen persona in private to just be Sarath. One evening, watching Sarath review policy documents while absently resting a hand on her growing belly, Evan realized something that should probably have terrified him but somehow didn't. He cared about her. Not just as the mother of his child, not just as someone he was bound to, but as a person he genuinely wanted in his life. The realization must have shown on his face because Sareth looked up. "What?" "Nothing," Evan said. "Just thinking. About—" He hesitated, then decided their established honesty required him to be truthful. "About how this isn't what I would have chosen, but I'm glad it led me to you. Is that strange?" Sareth set down her documents. "If it is, then we're both strange, because I've been thinking the same thing." They looked at each other across the room, and something unspoken but understood passed between them. This had become more than obligation. Somewhere in navigating an impossible situation together, they'd found something genuine. The final months of the pregnancy brought everything into focus. The court's opinion slowly shifted as Evan's commitment became undeniable. He attended every medical appointment, learned Volturian customs with obvious effort, and stood beside Sareth through political challenges with quiet support. He wasn't what anyone had expected a human to be, and that worked in their favor. Sareth's authority after the child is born, you'll have fulfilled the legal requirement to stay. You could leave, return to your ship and crew. I couldn't stop you, and honestly, I wouldn't want to keep you against your will anymore. Evan had been thinking about this question for months. "I don't want to leave." Sareth looked up sharply. "What?" "I don't want to leave," Evan repeated. "Not because I have to stay, but because I want to know this kid. I want to be part of their life. And he paused, then committed, I want to be part of your life. Not just as the father of your child, but as your partner, if that's something you'd want." Sareth's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. "You want to stay, even though you'd be free to go." "I want to stay because I'd be choosing it," Evan clarified. "That's the difference. These months we've spent together, getting to know each other, navigating this impossible situation, they've shown me someone I genuinely care about. Someone I respect and admire, and honestly, someone I'm pretty sure I'm in love with. So yes, I want to stay, not as your prisoner or your obligation, but as your chosen partner." Tears gathered in Sareth's eyes. "I've been trying so hard not to hope for that. It seemed unfair to want it when you were being kept here against your will. But yes, I want that too. Somewhere in all of this chaos, I fell in love with you, with your practicality and your humor and the way you see me instead of just the crown. I want you to stay, not because law requires it, but because I choose you." They came together then, the kiss both tentative and certain, a promise of something built on choice rather than obligation. The child was born 4 weeks later. The labor was long and difficult, Volturian births apparently more complicated than human ones, but ultimately successful. Their daughter was healthy, beautiful, with Evan's dark hair and Sareth's distinctive long ears and the most perfect tiny hands Evan had ever seen. They named her Lyra, a name that worked in both human and Volturian languages. The moment Evan held her, the last remnants of resentment about the situation evaporated. However it had started, whatever circumstances had led them here, this child was real and precious and his. 1 year passed. Evan and Sareth formalized their partnership in a ceremony that blended human and Volturian traditions. Evan became royal consort, a position that came with responsibilities he was still learning, but also gave him purpose beyond what he'd found in cargo work. He used his outside perspective to help Sareth navigate political challenges, his lack of court training sometimes an asset because he saw problems differently than the career politicians who surrounded her. Lyra thrived, a bright, curious child who'd captured the hearts of even the most conservative court members. She had Evan's fearlessness and Sareth's intelligence, and she was already demonstrating a talent for bringing people together that neither parent could quite explain. One evening, watching Sareth read to Lyra before bed, Evan found himself thinking about that night he couldn't remember. The night that had changed everything. He was glad he didn't remember it. Not because he regretted Lyra or his relationship with Sareth, but because remembering would make that night significant when it wasn't. What mattered wasn't how they'd come together, but what they'd built afterward. Sareth looked up from the story, caught him watching, and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "How none of this was what I planned," Evan admitted, "but it's exactly what I needed. You and Lyra, this completely unexpected life. It's better than anything I would have chosen for myself if I'd been trying to plan it." She reached for his hand across Lyra's small form. "I was so angry when I found out I was pregnant. Angry at whoever drugged us, angry at the situation, angry at you even though you were just as much a victim. But now I can't imagine my life without either of you in it." "Me neither," Evan said. "Which is strange because a year ago I was deliberately designing a life to avoid this exact kind of permanent connection. Turns out I didn't know what I actually wanted." Lyra, sandwiched between them, made a sleepy sound of contentment. Sareth kissed her daughter's forehead, then looked at Evan with an expression of such genuine love and gratitude that his chest tightened. "Thank you," she said softly, "for staying, for choosing us when you didn't have to, for turning an impossible situation into something beautiful." "Thank you for not throwing me under when your advisors wanted you to," Evan replied. "For refusing to sacrifice me for political convenience, for being someone worth staying for." They put Lyra to bed together, a routine they'd developed, then retreated to their own quarters. The royal district that had once felt like a prison now felt like home. The relationship that had started in anger and confusion had become the foundation of both their lives. As they settled into bed, Sareth curled against Evan's side, fitting perfectly in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Evan replied. "Even if I have no memory of how this started, I'm grateful it led us here." The alien queen who'd gotten angry and refused to let him leave had become the partner he chose to stay with. The pregnancy that had trapped them both had given them a daughter they adored, and a relationship neither had expected but both cherished. What began as fear and frustration had transformed into understanding, loyalty, and a bond neither planned, but both were grateful for.